get the data for something to deter you from bringing up a key point, a key element of success as you would define it. So it's really meant to be overall how you would define or measure our success as a city, and that's just as a starting point. Then we're going to go and look at each of these broad goal areas or categories right after that. Infrastructure and the environment, community development, meaning the physical aspect, economic development, community services, so we get at the social, cultural elements there, public safety, support services, and any other categories too. So the idea is that we're just using those broad headings to help generate from the council what are some of the key strategies, key actions, key elements of the program going forward. And staff will chime in too, and commission and committee members will bring the microphone around as we did before. I appreciate everyone chiming in and being very succinct. That made the process flow very well, and that allows us to keep everybody involved and engaged. At the same time, we want to make sure we cover the agenda here and end on time. We'd like to finish promptly around 3 o'clock. So anyhow, we can get started with council and the question: how would you define or measure success for the city of Emeryville as a whole? What are some of the things, both quantitatively and qualitatively, that would come to mind? And that helps to almost like build also a dashboard of sorts, that set of indicators that we can track and monitor and report on a periodic basis. So, yes, Mayor?
One thing that I would see as a measure of success is our ability to attract and retain families in Emeryville, and I think we've been making strides in this direction, but in order to create that stable environment where folks are living here for more than 6 months and are becoming involved in our communities and invested in becoming a community and coming together and working with each other to make this a better place to live.
Okay. Good. Other thoughts? Scott?
Well, I'm back to, meaning. What is the meaning of success? I mean, this is about so much bigger than anything practical. The world's religions just are obsessed with meaning and what success means. They are defining success. Each religion has its own definition of success. Well, I think in the public sphere, we can try to define what is successful. And what we can say is things like the health, happiness. Some nations like Bhutan have a happiness index. I think we could even have some kind of Emeryville happiness index. And to speak to the mayor's point, a lot of happiness is involved in a kind of future projection. Families are a future projection where you're looking forward. Hey, you can make a family, and that your family can go on to make another family. I mean, this is objectively what our species loves to do. We can have our city do what we like to do as a city. So I think that this component of long-range livability just looks like an Emeryville definition of success and happiness.
That's great. A lot of economists would tend to agree that GDP, for example, the traditional measure, or GNP, gross national product, is a fairly inadequate measure because it leaves out so many of the more intangible things that are maybe more important in a lot of ways, which is why you said Bhutan, which has officially adopted a happiness index as a measure of their country's success. That's very interesting. Other thoughts from council members?
Daniel, just right. Sorry, I'm not a council member. Along those lines, it occurred to me that I've worked in other jurisdictions that would have community condition indicators, which is an index of sort of quality of life measures, and maybe that's something that we could consider.
What are some of those factors on the index for, just for example?
I mean, if one, I don't know, it just pops into my head about library services, and that's not so germane to our city, but it would be something like the number of books available or number of volumes checked out per resident, and to kind of track that. Number of parks, public parks in acreage per resident, and to track that with a certain goal in mind.
Yeah, those are standard. Actually, there are books on the subject of municipal measurements, benchmarks, and you can research that. A lot of work has gone into that topic. Other things to keep in mind, Nora?
Yeah, I have a little more mundane view of the situation. I think city government has the responsibility to provide the environment and the atmosphere where people can live and feel safe and feel comfortable and be able to express themselves. And to do that takes money. So one of the very first measures has got to be your budget and your where you are on your budget, and is your income revenues meeting your outgo. So that's foundational to running a good city and measuring a good city right there, and that's a quantitative issue.
Absolutely.
The other issues of quality of life. It's been my experience over the years that people are very happy with a government that works. If they can call up and get a policeman before they put the telephone down, which happens many, many times in the city of Emeryville. People call 911, and before they hang up, there's cop cars outside of their door. This is a quality of life issue. Government is not necessarily visible, but it produces the services that people want. And that's I think very important, that you be able to measure the services that are provided directly to the citizens. In terms of percentage of parks to the population, I have to say you can have a good supply of parks, and if they're not maintained and they're not well policed, they're not a positive aspect to the community, they're a negative. So you have to keep things like that in mind. If you make another park, are you going to be able to maintain it? Are you going to be able to make it safe for people? We've struggled with that with Temescal Creek Park for many years. Finally, that is taking place, but it was an ongoing process. So that's a more mundane view of what I'm looking at.
That's good. Actually, there's research data that says the closer you are to well-maintained parks, your property values go up. The closer you are to poorly maintained parks, actually values go down. So apropos what you... that's right. Other points, Jack?
So for me, some of the key measures of our success will be who are we serving, and are we drawing people toward resources, not just being a place where well-resourced people decide to live. And with that, I want to make sure that we have policies around inclusiveness and keep kind of social justice at the forefront of our policy making decisions. And for me, what Nora's saying about parks matters too. I think that one of the things I would like to see in Emeryville, despite the fact that we have these giant fractures running through our city, the 80, the railroad tracks in San Pablo, is more of an evenness across neighborhoods, not just connectedness, but an even distribution of resources. We have places where we've been able to build affordable housing, but those areas require further investment and commitment from us in order to make it clear that this is part of Emeryville, and our community is something that we care about, and we care about it across the board. So a measure of success will be that there will be some areas of the city that will need more attention than others. So it may not necessarily be uniform, but I would like it to be just.
Good. Excellent. Other considerations? Okay.
Ditto to what my colleagues have said. I think that we could, staying on the more practical level, less kind of the philosophical level, I think a successful city is one that has high community engagement across populations, and we haven't talked about that yet, but it gets really difficult at times to fill all of our committees, and this is a plug for filling our committees. But I think a community that's engaged is a safer community. I think the more community members put into the community, the more they get out of it, and it's a two-way street. So I'm going to put a plug in here for community engagement.
Right. Yeah, and we won't worry right now about how we operationalize these indicators, but I think it gives a good sense of what's important, what we need to strive to meet as a city, both philosophical, very pragmatic, and everything in between. So it's a good starting point. So looking at these areas, infrastructure and environment, just tackling that, and this, of course, will no doubt invite staff along the way to comment as well, but we will take this comment and move into that topic here momentarily. Yes.
Hi, are we taking any input from us in terms?
Go ahead.
Okay, I think it's really. I'm April Atencio, member of Residents United. We need to have street performance beyond level of service, taking into account pedestrians, cars, public transportation, cyclists, and freight. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, excellent point. Thank you. Yes, sir.
So success, kind of on that same point, is I think mobility, and that's from 8 to 80. You should be able to live a full and complete life without a car. And I think that's one of the things that we need to look at as a city. I was a little bit late coming in this morning, but one of the visions I think that we need to look at is overall our transit as a goal of improving that. And when I say transit, that includes kind of a collection of the Emeryville AC Transit, bike share, pedestrian paths. They all have to work together, and that's something I'm not seeing today. I think there are a bunch of different silos, but we need to pull those all together.
Okay. Yeah. Was there anything else? Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Hi, sorry, a little late come in as well. I would say, kind of go off that point as well, is a good measure would be congestion, not talking about just vehicle congestion, but pedestrian, bicycles, getting around. How hard is it to do that? And that goes along with the mobility comment as well.
You're saying less congestion is a good thing?
Less conflict.
Less conflict, okay. All right. Yes.
I just wanted to offer a word for everything I'm hearing, and the word I would offer is sustainability. I mean, I think some of the things were talked about in the budgetary, references play into these things about bicycles and transit and other alternatives that we have to consider for how we build. I mean, all of this is really about building something sustainable. When you put a park next to a place where people live, it's more likely to be used. We can leverage the things we have going forward if we build sustainably.
Which means less resource intensive and ability to maintain systems over the long term. Okay, I will make those notes. Any other points from the council? So why don't we tackle infrastructure and the environment? And again, we're hoping to start with council here and get your ideas. What are some of the important goals that you would put forward in this area? Again, if some of the things that were identified earlier as an issue or a challenge, let's now turn that around and say our goal for the future should be to do X, Y, or Z with respect to any of those issues or challenges. So we're trying to express things more in the positive. What kinds of things can we do to change those issues and make them future successes and attributes of our successful city as we're defining it? Again, going through these classic areas, recognizing many of the areas and items you might suggest do overlap. They're not meant to be unidimensional. They're all mostly interconnected. So what are some of the things you would put forward as important strategies, goals with regard to infrastructure and the environment? Council members? Nora?
Yeah. In terms of infrastructure, we've made some really good inroads on this 100-year-old infrastructure. We absolutely must pay attention to not only maintaining it, but improving it. The case in point is the lighting of cities has changed dramatically. We've entered into some of that, but we've got to continue that effort throughout the city with the better lighting and the more efficient lighting. The other problem on infrastructure that I see is that we, like every city, every urban area, is faced with some real deterioration in our public spaces, and that is addressing the homeless issue, which deteriorates our public spaces. We're working now. We have a kind of a quasi working group with West Oakland because we have a real problem down there concerning the use of public spaces and the deterioration of public spaces, public health and public safety. We've got to address these problems because they not only affect the homeless, they affect everybody in the city, the people who live in the city, the people who work in the city. So on infrastructure, it's not only public works that is involved here, but it's public safety and it's also public health. So just want to mention that.
Right. Okay.
I'll jump in here. I think for infrastructure and the environment, we need to be very aggressive with our climate action plan. And we also need to see some of these CIP projects that have been on the books for a quarter of a century actually done. That will help with the fine-grained nature of our community as espoused in our general plan, and you know what I'm talking about, some bridges over some of our hurdles. And the other thing that we haven't discussed as in a public venue yet is protecting what needs to be protected against sea level rise, and making some decisions about what we're going to let the bay reclaim as the bay waters rise.
So on that last point, and the other comments you made, Maurice, are there some specific projects you would point to within the CIP that necessarily have a direct or indirect relationship to these climate impacts that Ruth was just referring to?
Yeah, we do actually have projects that we do. I mean, in fact, all the building projects we do, we include solar panels. So we're trying to chip away at the energy efficiency and amount of energy we use. We do have projects in the CIP to replace metal halide lights with more efficient LED lights. So we're working towards that. But one thing, we're not going to reach our goal just doing city facilities. I think we need to look bigger picture if you're talking about climate action. Would the council want to impose some requirements on private property owners to do energy upgrades in their buildings? I mean, those are things that need to be considered sort of a big picture with the climate action plan if you ever want to get to the point where you need to be. Sea level rise, there's only so much we can do from a small city standpoint. That's going to be a regional effort. And I know there's a lot of talks starting up about that, but we do have a shoreline that we need to address. But if you protect just the peninsula, you still have a lot, or the water's going to get around the city. So we got to figure out with the region how we're going to tackle that problem.
If I could just chime in on the sea level rise issue. I agree with Maurice, it is a regional issue. We can't just look at it, Emeryville alone. However, it may be an opportunity, and my staff has already sort of started thinking about this, to kind of dovetail a couple of council priorities. Another being to have a continuous pedestrian and bicycle path as part of the Bay Trail along the Emeryville Crescent, connecting Powell Street with the Bay Bridge. As you know, a goal in the general plan is to study that in conjunction with all other stakeholders. And if one of the regional proposals turns out to be a living levee along the west side of Interstate 80, that might give us an opportunity to get a trail in conjunction with that, and hopefully be able to address the impacts that would have on the Emeryville Crescent. Because certainly sea level rise of a couple of feet is probably going to have a more dramatic effect on the crescent than a bike path would. So maybe we can study those two together.
Is that project currently in the CIP, or is it unfunded?
No, it's not.
It's not
No,
identified.
it's just a gleam in our eye at this point, shall we say.
Okay, I see it twinkling there now. Okay, Mayor?
So this is actually just a comment on that same topic. I recently had the chance to go to the U.S. Conference of Mayors this past week, and I met the mayor of Mountain View, and she expressed to me that there may be a 9-county bond measure coming up in the 2016 election that may be a funding source for this type of marshland increase. So just want to insert that in there, and co-sign on to the importance of the climate action plan and the sea level rise protection that I heard from Councilmember Atkin.
Are we considering those two things distinct or different, or is the protection on sea level part of the climate action plan? I assume that it's embodied in that somehow. I don't know, Charlie or Maurice, did you have a sense of that?
Well, as far as shoreline protection, we have shoreline protection all the way around our shoreline, except for in one area where we have funding in our CIP to investigate or to protect Point Emery. So that's really the one area where we haven't really addressed shoreline protection. Of course, if the sea level rises, it's going to be above everything anyway. So we need to really, work regionally on the approach to tackle sea level rise. But whether or not over the periods of while it's rising, do we want to protect what we have in the park at Point Emery? I think would be discussed.
Let me just say, there's the idea of levees, but there's also the idea of wetlands restoration, which can act as sponges and help absorb some of these changes. And so actually increasing wetlands might be an approach that we would consider for Point Emery.
Can I just add, from the staff level?
Sure.
The Climate Action Plan and climate resilience and adaptation are linked, absolutely. The climate adaptation and resilience part involves much more the planning and looking forward, like not undergrounding utilities in areas that may be submerged. And it gets very, very broad, very fast. The climate action plan is more focused on the things we can do to mitigate our impacts going forward. So to answer your question, I'm saying they're related, but they're not the same thing.
And this is Nancy Humphrey, for those who don't know, who is the staff person in charge of the Climate Action Plan.
Good. Excellent. Thank you. Scott?
A little bit more about addressing what we can do about our city-related greenhouse gases. We can create a microgrid, meaning we have high daytime use of power in our commercial areas, like especially our biotech industries. And we have all these empty warehouse roofs that could have solar panels on them. But the current law doesn't allow the transfer of solar power parcel to parcel. And if we could cut a deal politically with the state, our own city greenhouse gas production could go down quite dramatically if this were allowed. It would just require a yes from the state of California, and we could reduce our local greenhouse gas production quite significantly. Mm-hmm. And then about our city spaces, our public spaces, and the homelessness, I think we could do further joining of our surrounding cities with a plan that would address this issue. And Nora mentioned earlier that we're involved in a West Oakland group that is trying to deal with this issue. I think if we look at it regionally this way, we can have a coordinated social services approach along with a way that we can keep our public spaces open to all users and find ways of having the homeless population integrate into the rest of our society. We've seen by taking a regional approach to our fire department, we've gained a higher quality fire department at less cost. So I think that we should look regionally to some of our adjoining cities to see if we can maximize our work together for the benefit of all.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So in a way, this is might be an objective of our infrastructure category, and strategically approach that through a regional coalition of some sort, not unlike what you've done on other topics like public safety. So there's a model there that can be replicated, perhaps. That's very interesting. Other infrastructure-related goals or objectives, Jack?
I'll ditto what everyone is saying about the climate action plan, and also while the elements on the CIP for major kind of bike ped infrastructure like the bridge, they're really important to me. I want those things too. I want to make our city more bicycle and pedestrian friendly overall outside of those major projects. One of the complaints I hear about the most is traffic. And I think that right now we have some elements in town that are really good, really well used. I live on Adeline, so I watch people bike all day long. But unless you are a really confident cyclist, it's difficult to get around our city. And we should be doing much better in terms of having an infrastructure that is friendly to all levels and all ages of cyclists. And so that's something I'd like to see us move toward, even as we're still keeping of course, the bridge and the connectivity in mind. It's difficult to get over even a few streets, much less crossing those big kind of geographic barriers in Emeryville.
Mm-hmm. Good. That's great. That's a very specific thing that, and again, it's rather obvious, but research also confirms that more people will bicycle and walk if they perceive that as a safe, secure, predictable system. And not everybody is a member of the Lycra crowd that likes to just bike in 35 mile per hour traffic and feel comfortable doing it. I mean, even 25 miles per hour is dangerous when you are on a bike or walking alongside traffic moving at that speed. I just note Aspen, Colorado adopted a policy of 20 is plenty. They adopted a citywide speed limit of 20 miles per hour in the downtown just for that reason. And others have followed suit because speed and traffic accidents or injury are very definitely correlated. So anyhow, let's talk about community development. And I know there's, again, overlap because this is physical building, land use, urban design, building form and mass and so on. But what uses go where? How do we ultimately link that to sound economic development? These are all interconnected issues. What would the council say are some of your top goals and objectives in that category? Yes.
So I don't know if there's anyone in this room who would disagree with me that affordable housing is one of the biggest crises of our time in the Bay Area, and between maintaining our current stock and creating new affordable housing and doing what we can to protect the renters in our community who are feeling the pinch with tenant protections and possibly rent control. I think those are at the top of my list.
Mm-hmm. Okay, other council members? Agree, disagree? I mean, it's also helpful to hear if there's overlap and consistency, so it doesn't, it's good if you mention some of the same things here as well.
But you're not done dealing with the housing crisis.
Right.
No.
Yeah. Other points to add, Scott?
Well, I would just say that going forward, affordable housing seems to offer us the chance to build a real community, and that is just going to be important for us going forward, given today's environment. As far as density, having a higher density of our city, I don't have a problem with a higher density as long as we have more livability. And so I think that we need to design our higher density with all of the aspects of that in mind. And there's nothing wrong with tall buildings as far as livability, as far as I'm concerned. It's just a question of where they are, their shape, their relationship to everything else and our general plan. So it's not that height isn't necessarily a problem. It depends where there's height. And a design really matters going forward. And to have greater mobility with higher density is a real challenge. But I think that if we get away from the one person in car model that we have so much of right now, with the twice our population coming in from elsewhere, most of which are coming in cars, if we can make the transition to less of that and more public transit, walking and cycling, I just think that's a better direction for us, and we could have a better city, even as it's a denser city.
Good. Excellent. Thank you. Yes?
I just want to second everything that Scott is saying. I also am in favor of density when it doesn't reward more cars. Because I think there's a way to add residents to a neighborhood with discouraging the use of cars. I think that supporting our local transit and supporting folks who ride transit goes hand in hand with affordable housing, because a lot of the folks who don't want to spend the money on cars, those savings that they can make from not owning a car and not paying for a parking space can be spent right here in our community.
Good. Yes, Jack?
I want to explore support for people who are currently unhoused, and but beyond kind of social services and resource centers, I want housing for people who are unhoused. And so I'm not certain if that would take the form of a project here in Emeryville, or whether we could coordinate with our neighbors, but we're all trying to grapple with this, and I think that's a very that's the concrete solution that we should be moving toward. And so whether it happens here or whether we are coordinating with Berkeley or Berkeley and Oakland, that's something I want to see us move toward.
Good. Other community development topics or issues? Again, I want to make sure if we're leaving anything crucial out, staff will fill in the details. Ruth?
The equity and social justice issues that Jack mentioned, I think, kind of come to a head under the broad section of community development, and I think we need to look at who's being left behind in the new economy and how to bring them along. We've identified affordable housing as a crisis here, but there's other kinds of things around economic opportunity for the people who are being left behind. And it was really clear to me, maybe around between 2000 and 2005, we had a little dot-com bubble, and people on the east side were feeling very left behind about the high-tech stuff. And so if we're going to do economic development that fosters biotech and high-tech, that will result, that will exacerbate some of the equity issues that we're experiencing.
Right. Okay, Scott? Oh, okay, sorry. Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
What'd you say?
Judy.
I was just pointing to Judy.
Hi, Judy Timmel. So our community also includes the workers who work here, and we haven't talked very much about them. We have recently initiated a minimum wage, which I fully support, and I think we need to continue to refine that ordinance so that there are additional protections for the workers. And of course it also includes housing so that they don't have to commute from great distances to live here. I support all this, the talk about a need to increase the diversity of our population. I think that's one way to do it, is to incorporate people who work at all levels of job, not just the high-tech jobs, but at Target and IKEA.
Good, thank you. So some very clear, strong themes there under community development. This is category C, economic development. What would you put forward in that regard? Earlier, it was mentioned about attracting small business. So I don't know if that's something you want to carry over as a goal or objective as we think about future city programs or projects and activities. But just to remind you, there's that list from earlier. We can try to bring forward any of the things that you saw as possible issues or challenges, and then we want to turn that into a specific objective moving forward. Ruth?
I'm not sure how to offer a carrot in this way, since we don't have redevelopment, because what we did under redevelopment allowed for significant subsidies for Arizmendi, and I would love to be able to see us adopt policies, regulations, ordinances, or any tool like that would help the development of worker-owned businesses. And we're small enough that I think we can support small businesses that way, and I think there's great advantages to having them be worker-owned. And I don't know what kind of economic development tools we have now, but we spent a lot of money to bring and keep Arizmendi here, and it's a good example of a worker-owned cooperative.
Okay. Other suggestions, ideas? Yes, Mayor?
I do want to carry over the idea of supporting small businesses into this category of economic development, and just seeing what we could do for the folks who are already here, and how we can make it easier for folks who do want to come to Emeryville and start new businesses.
One potential idea for a small business could be, in so much of our recent development, we have what could be called liner retail, meaning first floor, second floor parking, and then there's small retail spaces available around it. That's right, and so much of this space is unrented. We could institute a policy of required descending rent rate if it isn't rented in a certain amount of time as a condition of approval for the project, so that we know that the liner retail would be rented out eventually, because if it wasn't, it would be free. So, you know, at a certain point, a small business can see an opportunity, and perhaps these, you know, in effect, it would be guaranteed lower rent if they aren't rented out in a certain amount of time, as an approach to this issue.
Good, thank you.
I also want to see some regulations around the sharing economy. We talked about, I think we need to be collecting TOT on places like Airbnb and VRBO. As another revenue source, and I'm not sure if there's other industries. We've heard from the taxi companies how detrimental Uber and Lyft and those kind of services have been. I'm not sure how we can regulate that, but again, that's something else about enhancing at least potentially our revenue base.
Again, you start to see some direct connection to what you were saying defines a successful Emeryville. So the idea being that if we do the things that you're mentioning here as goals and objectives, if we are to accomplish that, we should have a positive effect on these measures of success, right? So that's the theory of city budgeting here. If we know what we're trying to impact in terms of indicators and results, do these strategies, do these actions or policies have that intended effect?
The other thing is collecting sales, if we can collect sales tax on internet sales. Whether it's point of service or endpoint, so people who are ordering through the internet here, whether we could collect some sales tax because the goods are being delivered here.
There was a comment over here. Yes.
I don't know if this applies to Emeryville, but I often go to Piedmont Street and the little shops along there because it's very easily walked and you can do all kinds of shopping in just a few hours. And I have noticed the pattern of landlords. I think new landlords came in and raised the rents atrociously, like people are raising rents on our renters. And many of these small businesses have had to close or relocate out of the neighborhood. If we can make spaces available cheaper for people coming in with small businesses, can we also protect our small businesses from exorbitant rent raises by the owners?
Okay, good. Thank you. Mayor?
One thing I'd like to explore is public-private partnerships in terms of when we do have big companies coming into town, how can we, by policy or by condition of approval, encourage the good behavior that would lead to the good outcomes for our measurements of success. For instance, in Oakland, I understand that when they have new dispensaries, they actually have certain requirements as to what type of community benefits are going to be provided, and there's, I believe there are numbers attached to that. And that's something I'd like to see moving forward when we do have our staffing filled in that department, and someone who's actually looking at the businesses that are coming in. I want to make sure that we're taking advantage of opportunities to encourage these businesses to do good and to really partner with the community in such a way that we feel their presence. We certainly, I think we're in a place where we can expect that businesses that come to Emeryville are doing so because they see inherent benefits, and I'd like for the community to see those benefits as well, rather than seeing an institution that's walled off and separate from the community.
So just to make sure I understood this item, so you mentioned community benefits. So you're saying there's a list of predefined top priority benefits that the community would be looking for, and that's something you would like any new businesses or organizations to respond to as a condition of their coming into Emeryville, something along those lines?
That's right. And just to draw the line between small businesses and large businesses, not every business is going to have the capacity to take on those that type of reciprocation. I'm looking at the bigger businesses that are coming into town.
Yeah, because the idea of community benefit agreements along those lines is a tool that cities have adopted elsewhere in California, elsewhere around the United States. It kind of goes hand in hand with your land use and zoning requirements. It's kind of a further level of articulation of zoning in a lot of ways. Okay, so, Jack?
I think that I like all of these suggestions, and I just wanted to add, in terms of commercial rent control, we're not able to institute commercial rent control. That's the state does not allow that. That battle was fought a long time ago. However, I do like some of the suggestions about doing this through negotiations or community benefits. The problem is that we'll only capture new proposals, but Berkeley, I know, has explored a vacancy tax in the past, so that if you have an empty storefront, this is something you would have to then do the math on. Is it worth it to keep it empty? And it's something that the city could consider if we want those, if we want the street level activation that we've been talking about for so long, and as a way of kind of grandfathering that in.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because the vacant lot is like the bane of a city. It doesn't really give you any benefits. It usually is a sign of deterioration. It creates maybe a lack of feeling of safety, and you don't get any economic benefit or revenue. So yeah, that's certainly it's an interesting point. Okay, community services. Let's talk about that. So the fourth on the list here, and again, fleshing out what are some of the potential goals and objectives that you might have as council members. Scott?
Community services, I think, is something that we would all like to have more of. They cost money. A potential source that we might consider. We have a two-tier business license tax as it currently stands. If your business is large and you have over a certain volume of gross receipts, you cease to pay any more percentage of your gross receipts. We could put a measure on a ballot coming up in the future that would make basically a flat tax for our business license tax. And it might impact some of our largest corporations, but the Bay Area we seem to be the exception to this. We are the only city in the Central Bay that I know of that has this two-tier, the bigger your business, the less you pay proportionally system. And, you know, we might, if we have that on the ballot and it's successful and we retain these large businesses, we might have significant new income from the business license tax, which looks to be about almost a third of our current general fund income. So that could really boost our income.
Okay. Other goals, objectives? Yeah.
In terms of community services, like I said, I've been really proud that we've expanded our services to youth in the community and to institute a sliding scale. I think that we need to finally make a permanent, sustainable commitment to the Emeryville Child Development Center, which has never taken more than 2% of our general fund in a year. And just go ahead and say that we believe you know, our youngest children are worth 2% of our budget every year. And I think that this is going to have significant impacts in terms of the fact that what we're trying to do in Emeryville is attract and retain families. And more, because the state is not funding childcare, it's becoming a boutique service. I would hope that the city of Emeryville would want to retain the public character of childcare. It's really important, not just for young kids, but especially for women who work, who continue to you know, bear the responsibility for childcare. It strips women out of the workforce when they're not able to access affordable childcare. And so for me, it's an issue which we're so perfectly situated to at least address within the bounds of our city. We're a city with a lot of workers. We're a city that wants to retain families. We're a highly educated and progressive city. And so I think we should just finally make the commitment, whether it's, you know, what percentage this is going to be, to add some stability to the center. Because what we keep getting back whenever we study it is that there's not enough predictability at the center. So I would definitely like to see that, and I would like to see us make a commitment, which is a budgetary and a moral commitment, to say that we will retain sliding scale with our community services programs for after school and for our youth. While our demographics in Emeryville, we looked at that a little bit when Charlie was posting that, but the demographics of our schools are very different. And in order to draw people toward resources, I think that our school has an effect on 200 families every day. And I hope that we maintain that and even expand that going forward. And so what Scott's talking about is the funding, and I know that's the piece that we will need to think about and work out. But I hope that those programs are really seen as deserving of our attention and our commitment going forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Other items under community service?
I'll just take a second to second Councilmember Asher's ideas.
Okay. Public safety is the next category. What are your top goals and objectives in this regard? Again, we saw some of the chief's statistics and trend lines. Maybe we can reflect that and try to affect those different trends in a positive direction. Ruth?
What about Neighborhood Watch and some citizen engagement activities that maybe the police department could help us with so that we're more connected to each other? I know some of my neighbors on my street. I don't know everybody, but I think a lot of people who come and go may not know each other. So that's probably a budgetary item just in terms of how you deploy staff around that. But I think potentially the rewards could be significant.
Okay, yes, Nora?
Yeah, as far as public safety is concerned, this is critical to the people in this city, as you can see by the high level of support for the police. I think we have to take a hard look during this budget process at what resources the police department has now, what programs we are going to be trying to institute, and I'm particularly concerned with the youth programs that you've described, Chief. This takes money, but it's very critical, and it fits in with exactly what Jack and you're trying to do with the Child Development Center. So during this budget process, my goal is to take a real critical analysis of what resources the police department has now and what realistically we need to not only maintain the high service we have, but to improve on it.
Yes, Jack?
Well, Chief, this is not going to come as a surprise to you. Bicycle officers are really important to me.
And me.
And I've voiced this multiple times. So I would really like to see us return to having bicycle officers. It does. It does.
Okay. It's one of those things that is contemplated by the police, and it would be funded if we did what Nora suggested in analyzing where the gap is in terms of what we're funding, what we should be funding, and trying to assess that. Go ahead.
I also want to put a plug in here for emergency preparedness. Our public safety departments are way too small and will be overwhelmed immediately with a large-scale disaster. And we really need to give the population our own, the resources and the training to be able to be an asset in disaster response and not just something about needing to be needing the help. So it's not just CERT on the fire side, but it's like, beefing up first aid training to the community, light search and rescue techniques to extricate people out of, if they're trapped, that kind of stuff. So I think the more that we can talk that up and do those programs, the better off we'll be.
Okay, and Chief, you had a comment on the previous.
Bicycle officers, I am 100%. I'm 100% in agreement. For clarification, we do have, I think, 3 officers who are trained to ride. We just don't have the luxury of putting them out on the bikes because they're needed elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So it is a staffing issue.
I just wondered if you or other staff could address on the emergency preparedness, is there a understanding that there's a gap there, that we're underfunding that area? We must have some baseline program. So just
we do, and if our HR director Ian would like to talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing in the area of emergency preparedness, and then also we are rebuilding our EOC. Those are 2 really important things, but. Okay. Ian, I don't know if you want to give just a quick overview.
Perfect.
Your staff heads up that effort.
Yeah, so kind of by default, Human Resources has taken up this effort. Previously, when the department was housed the fire department was in Emeryville, they didn't take the initiative or have the capacity to move a lot of the emergency preparedness programs forward. Fortunately, we have a staff member who's very excited about this program area and has done a lot of quality work here and worked in partnership with Alameda County Fire Department. So some of the main programs we've done is trained all staff on, at least the department heads, on sort of emergency management training in the event of a major disaster. We all have kind of earthquake preparedness training on the programs for in the event that there is a disaster. Also, we've been taking on the local hazard mitigation plan. That's something that needs to be updated once every 5 years. And we've had a number of citizen meetings with that. And once that plan is in place, then we are eligible to receive funding in the event of a disaster. So these are important things that we have to have in place with FEMA. And we've trained council on sort of the protocols in the event of an emergency. So there's been a lot of developments there. We do have some other plans in place for enhancing and expanding, but sort of the basics are in place, and we do have a plan moving forward. We do have some pretty strong resources with Alameda County Fire that we intend to leverage too as we go forward.
Yes. Here.
So I just wanted to strongly express my support for cops on bicycles, and I also just wanted to think of it an umbrella that would cover neighborhood watch and community involvement, which is the idea of neighborhood councils, which is already moving forward, but I just don't know that it has any traction at the moment. We were hoping to have a pilot going this spring with the Park Avenue neighborhood, and we definitely feel that those neighbors are feeling unrepresented at the moment, and I think that could be an avenue not only to get folks together, but to get them the critical information that they need in terms of what resources do we have for emergency preparedness. So, for public safety, for emergency preparedness, and for building community, I think it's important to get our neighborhood councils up and running.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
So, again, it ties back to some of the things we defined earlier as success, but I just wanted to clarify. So, the idea of neighborhood watch, is that distinct from the councils that you're talking about now, or could that be kind of combined as one overall neighborhood development type activity?
Ruth, would you have a problem with collapsing those ideas together in terms of?
I think they're really different.
Totally different. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Neighborhood watch is a police.
They're separate and distinct because
they're really
watch
different
from each other.
Right.
Focus on crime prevention.
Okay.
Partnership and community members getting to know each other, and so
Okay.
I think they're distinct. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I put them close together, but I can see doing, depends on whether you're a lumper or a splitter, I mean, so different ways to carve up reality, many ways. So let's talk about support services, and Carolyn, maybe you can just broadly define some of the things that you would put under that heading. I assume that has to do with calling City Hall or getting response on basic needs of...
Actually, it would include, it would include functions such as HR and IT and legal services, which we were going to talk about. What am I forgetting? Finance, of course. So we just wanted to make sure that we did not overlook some of those areas as having needs and some potential goals.
You mean you just might need staff in those different areas in order to accomplish some of these?
Well, that would be one example as we're talking about setting goals.
Right.
There would be a need to discuss the current state of things in our staffing and our HR. So that goes to resources. IT certainly
Mhm.
does happen to go to the community engagement
Mhm.
area that we were talking
Sure.
about, and I hope we have a chance to, call on Michael to talk a little bit about the efforts that are being made in the area of more sophisticated technology ways of reaching out to the community.
Mhm.
Finance obviously is at the core of also our making sure that we identify the resources, the financial resources that
Okay.
we need as well.
So do we need any staff members here to
It would be
mention some
great.
of these things?
We could start with Ian to talk a little bit about our current state when it comes to trends and current conditions in the staffing,
Okay. good.
which of course tends to be our top expense. It's
Great. Okay. Ian Appleyard, Human Resources Director. And absolutely, the cost of employees is not going down. It is increasing. So it is a very valuable resource. There's other challenges that kind of face the organization in general. And changing demographics is a big one. We're seeing a lot of baby boomers now leaving the workforce. So this isn't something that's unique to Emeryville necessarily, but something that we need to always keep our eye on. And with that, there's sort of there are some difficult areas to attract and retrain employees in the public service. Some high-level public service skills are now kind of exiting the workforce. So we're really working hard to make sure that we have competitive salary and benefits and are a very attractive place to work. I mean, we want to make Emeryville a great place to work. So we have expanded some of our internal programs to help sort of boost morale, keep employees around. Health and wellness programs have been increasing. We have a robust employee recognition program as well. But to be honest, I believe the staff is working hard. You have a very competent staff here in Emeryville. It's innovative, creative. Those are the kind of things that you don't usually hear when you hear of government entities. Emeryville, I think, is very well positioned in terms of how the staff and the organization functions. However, I would say they're kind of at capacity. I mean, a lot of people are working very hard here, and I see that everywhere. I'm not in every service that we provide, whether it be administrative or direct, support with the police department. Everyone's working very hard. So I think there are questions of resource allocation, a question of restoration of services. I mean, between the recession and the disillusionment of redevelopment, those are two areas that hit Emeryville pretty hard, whether it was with actual services or with employees not receiving increases that maybe they would like to have seen. And that balanced with sort of where we are budgetarily and the fact that we are entering into labor negotiations over the next 3 to 5 months. What are going to be the asks at the table? I'd say we're in pretty good shape in terms of our relationship with the unions and our relationship with our employees. I want to maintain that. At the same time, we do need to make sure that we balance these other costs that are coming our way, including our health costs are going to be increasing, and pension costs are always increasing.
Any ideas, comments, suggestions for goals, objectives from council in this area? And again, it's hard. I know you want to say, well, what does it take to be able to accomplish all of this? Maybe that's the objective in terms of staffing and system support or expansion. I don't know. I'm really asking the question of council. What do you think we need to do in this area?
Oh, okay. Ian, maybe you can address this. Emeryville is unique in a lot of ways. We have more of an influx of people than we have people living here. But have you compared the number of people per population, number of staff we have per population in Emeryville across the board with other cities in the Bay Area? I did that 4 or 5 years ago and found that we were on the high end. On the other hand, you can't really base it on percentage of population because of the enormous influx 4 times coming into this city.
Okay.
But I'd like to have your comments on that as we move forward. Revenues are, how can I say this? it's pretty dicey. You can't really project out revenues like you used to be able to do, especially with the internet taking more and more of our sales tax. So would you comment on the number of people that we have? And I happen to agree with you. We have excellent staff, and everybody's working really hard. But if you could address that question.
And I probably have to do a little more research in terms of population and how that relates to the FTEs that we have in the city. I'd say FTE we're about 160, and that includes part-time staff, about 135 full-time staff. And how that correlates to population, that's something I'd have to look into a little more detailed. I mean, there's so many factors. We're a city that has a large commercial presence. We have some industry, we have some residents. It's a real blend, a real mix. Population-wise, we're very similar to a place like Piedmont, but it's a very different community. We're similar to Albany, but a very different community. So I'd really have to look into that. I know specifically for, I asked my HR colleagues, what kind of staffing resources they have in comparison to their FTEs, because that is usually kind of direct correlation. And I think we're just about right in terms of our staffing, but we also offer more services. Some HR departments don't do payroll. We do payroll. They don't do emergency preparedness. We do that. They might not have a health and wellness program or a robust training program. Those are the things that we do have. They just kind of tend to the core services. So it's a very dynamic analysis.
So I have a question for you. Since you see all of the recruitments that we have going on, are you finding the applicants have the necessary skills that are now exiting due to retirements or moving elsewhere?
Mm-hmm. And then that also goes from sort of discipline to discipline. It really depends what you're looking at. Since I've been here, I think we've made one full-time hire a month. That's kind of been our pace, right? And we've had great employees. We've managed to just attract some really quality employees that, even if they don't have all the technical skills, maybe they have the people skills, and we can bring them up on the technical skills, those kind of things. So I think we've been very fortunate. The areas that are hard to recruit now, and this is true for all public agencies, are in HR, finance, and IT, sort of infrastructure. Everybody's competing for police officers, so we've really been kind of innovative there and trying to make sure that we're adequately staffed with public safety. So I think we've been very fortunate in terms of who we're able to attract and retain, and we're really making a commitment to keep people here, to build our own. That's really the best solution for sustainability.
I just have one follow-up comment on the analysis of the total number of people that we have. One of the pieces of information that may or may not be important is in the police records. I would suspect that out of the total universe of arrests that are made in Emeryville, less than 20% of them are Emeryville residents. But if you could pull that piece out, that impacts, because of course the high cost of the police. But let's find out how many of the people that are arrested, what percentage are really Emeryville residents.
Go ahead. So I really like what you said, Ian, about promoting from within and building our own, and I want to make sure that we have the resources to do that. So I would just put down professional development. I think that's a valuable thing to have. I think in my service on the board of Stop Waste, we have an executive director, but she was grown in-house, completely organic, and she was made a deputy executive director for almost a year, so she could debut those services fully functionally, right, and have an understanding of her whole job. And I with the competitive marketplace, I think, and with our fantastic staff in so many different departments, I think it's always good to be looking for everyone to be able to step up if that's what they want to do.
That's great. Yeah. Okay, Jim?
I have an answer for Nora.
fast, efficient service for you, Nora. On average,
85%.
you're pretty close. About 10% of our arrests are Emeryville residents.
90%. And that's a high, the revenue coming in from the shopping centers is fine, but it has a cost to it, and that's the cost.
There it is.
There, that's it. That's the cost.
Okay. Double-fisted. Okay, on the subject of support services, Jack?
Okay, so one of the things that would be helpful for me is to understand, I believe I came in maybe right after or right around the dissolution of redevelopment and the tail end of the recession. And so understanding exactly what cuts we made at that point to staffing and services would be something that's useful to me, because if I'm thinking about what's being restored, I have no idea, because I think it may have been from 5 or 6 years ago. So that would be useful for me. I also want to make sure that in terms of, again, back to community services, that we have a career path for people who are interested in doing that kind of work. And so I think I want to, around our kids, we seem to have far too many part-time workers, casual workers, and as a city, we've been talking about making a real commitment, not just in terms of the ECCL, but also programming, and I think that should also be part of the way that we staff our programs. So it's just something that I want to consider in terms of how many full-time staff we have around our youth in our youth programs, and what kind of a career path we have for the folks working in community services.
So the idea of the full-time, are you saying that's specific to those working with youth, or just across the board?
I'd want to look at it across the board in community services.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, could I just make a comment on that, Jack? One of the reasons that the fire department was so much in favor of contracting out to Alameda County was because we are such a small city. There is really not a wide career path. So what happens is, when we train people here, and I'm 100% in favor of that, the opportunities for them to move up in a real small city, they aren't there, so they go someplace else. So what you have here is you're on the horns of a dilemma. You want highly trained people, you want them reinforced, but where are they going to go in a small city?
Yeah, I agree with you in part, and maybe I need to rephrase that a little bit. I want to understand what career paths there are within community services, because there are some, right? But I also want to avoid the constant churning of that staff that happens around concerns over benefits and classification, because what we end up doing is we hire them for a certain amount of hours. It never lasts through the entire school year, and we end up having a lot of instability around kids. And so if we can look at, what is that model really costing us? How often are we having to retrain people? What does it mean to bring new people in halfway through the school year around our youngest kids? If we're trying to provide more stability, like I think we are through the ECCL, and more predictability, I think it should be maybe better reflected in our staffing. But again, it's something I first need to look at to understand, what we might be able to do to change that. And it may be that, we're so small that we may have to think creatively about it, but I do see it as a concern.
Well, if I could say, I agree with you, because on the turnover there, you also have to address the other issue of the quality and caliber of the candidates you get, when you're constantly churning like that. But there is another arena, since you brought up the fact of what we eliminated when redevelopment went away. Yeah. I want us to take a hard look at the community preservation officer. Right now, poor Vic is overwhelmed. And one would have thought, we really haven't increased any single-family housing, but there appears to be more and more problems addressed by community preservation within these multifamily units. So we got to take a hard look at that during this public budget process.
So what is the objective there is to expand the staffing in that category?
Well, we have a community preservation
we got rid of
officer. We lost her.
We lost her at the recession.
Yeah.
And,
Beef up. Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
Restore. Yeah, that's a restore.
Okay. Good. Anything else under this category? And then, are there any other topics or issues we didn't cover for which you think there should be a goal and objective established here by the council?
Michael's here. I wonder if IT won.
Oh, IT, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Parenti, the IT manager for the city, and our department's role, one of our roles, is to support all of the other departments in their efforts and to help them kind of achieve their goals. And so as you see all these projects and the demand on the various departments increases, that demand trickles down to the support services and us. To give you kind of an example of 1 week that we had in over a 5 business day span, or I think 7 business day span, we went live at the police department with the new 911 system. We went live at the finance department with the new finance system, and we migrated our entire email system to a new provider in the cloud within a 5 business day span, because sort of that's the way things lined up for us. It was not the way we planned it, but that's how it goes. One of our kind of slogans is we will not be a bottleneck. And in order to do that, we need to stay ahead of the technologies and kind of make sure we have the infrastructure in place to support these. You heard Chief Tejada earlier say that she was having trouble pulling data from the system, and so we're going to be working on that this year to make it easier for her. You hear Maurice in Public Works talk about all the maintenance and the repairs. We've been working really hard with them to implement a new software system so that he can have access to information better and make better and quicker decisions on how to deploy his resources. We're working on all kinds of other projects like records management to make access to information easier. We sort of a role that I've taken on personally in possibly a temporary or possibly permanent role is public outreach, using technology to get information out. We have a Twitter feed that we started a few months ago. We're up to a whopping 140 followers, I believe. So if we can keep that going, we're trying hard. It's I'm just a few dozen short of the Kardashians, I think. But we're almost there. We're trying really hard. We spent a lot of effort on redoing our website to make it look more modern and make it easier to find. Now we're circling back through that website to review the content and make sure we put the content in the right place. So we gave it a facelift. Now we're going in and kind of gutting it and rearranging where information is to make it easier to access. That's kind of where we're at right now. Do you have any questions for me? I can.
Yeah.
And you're doing all this with how many people in your department?
We're actually now fully staffed. We just hired a new person, started last week. So we have 3 additional plus myself. One of them has been at the police department all night and working all night on an upgrade over there as well. So we're churning through the projects.
Okay. Good. Oh, let's go back to Scott.
This is just something about support services and support services we have that exist in a limited form, which has to do with the cultural life of our city. We have a population that's expanding, and there was an event that occurred that surprised me. We had a holiday parade starting over at the Child Development Center, and hundreds of children maybe marching to City Hall. We arrived at City Hall, there were more than 500 people. And this little city that I've been a part of for so many decades hasn't seen a crowd like this for not protests. This was like a cultural occasion, and this niche between the old City Hall and the new City Hall was filled with performances going on. And we shouldn't forget that we have culture that's growing in our city, and we have this property right next door that's sitting vacant, and we just have growing cultural needs actually. You know, that's really a factor, and opportunities for our city. So let's not forget about that going forward.
Let me just, for those who don't know what Councilmember Donahue is alluding to, we have the old brick industrial building next door the city has purchased for an art center. And we had a plan that was all approved by the Planning Commission and ready to go forward when redevelopment funding was yanked away from us. And so we now don't have the resources to renovate that building and turn it into the art center that we would like to. So that's clearly an issue that we need to address.
Perfect place for public-private.
If I can add one more piece I forgot to add, I'm sorry, about emergency preparedness. We're also going to be presenting some plans for the technology side and recovering communications and infrastructure. So that's a piece that we've been working on for emergency preparedness as well, because if there is a disaster, we need to know what needs to come back and how fast. And of course, there's a cost to that. The faster it is to bring it back, the more it's going to cost to set it up.
And Daniel, also related to technology and public outreach, is that we're making a new effort to really expand and fully utilize our cable television capabilities, which really have never been utilized to fully, not, yeah. Full, that would be a nice way to put it. But I think it's untapped completely. It's bone dry. So
I think Dave is cheering inside that box
my hope is that we will be able to bring tours of our new public works upcoming projects out in the city to the screen, to TV. We hope that we can interview the council members about the policies that they're working on and the initiatives. We hope that we can cover the holiday parade so that we, can share with all the excitement and culture. Right. Build the culture of our city.
Right. Okay.
Can we hear from Michael Gita in the city attorney's office?
Yes. We were just...
Guys, keep it without a trouble.
Okay. Sure. Just similar to the IT role, the city attorney's office is in a support role to the city council as well as to the various departments. Many of the priorities that are listed here will come through the city attorney's office in one form or the other, whether they're initiated by the city council in terms of policy initiatives that you would like to see. Those often translate into ordinances or regulations which we adopt and may later have to defend, or as well as the processing of land use applications, negotiating agreements for community benefits or development agreements or what have you. We're a very, very busy office. And we, my goal is not to be the bottleneck, but we often are, because we touch literally every single office or department in this organization. This is a very active council. You keep the city staff very, very busy, and you keep my office very, very busy, and I appreciate that. We are. It is one of my hopes coming out of this meeting today to hear some of your thoughts about the priorities for some of the policy initiatives that are either in the hopper, in the works, or on the horizon, because it would be very helpful for me to understand where the council's priorities are in terms of the capacity that I have. In terms of just certain, a few updates to the council and to the community out there, in the post-redevelopment world, the city last year was able to prevail against the Department of Finance and secure funding for the South Bayfront Bridge, which will be going forward. We were also able to get a determination from the DOF relating to certain parcels that the former redevelopment agency owns. So, for example, the Glass House parking garage over in North Hollis area continues to be able, the city gets to retain that, to be able to continue to use that as a public parking garage, which benefits the city and certainly that area of town. The art center next door, the city also gets to retain that to be able to use in the future as a future art space. We are, we're responding to both the litigation that's initiated by the states, litigation that is initiated as part of, litigation that we initiate as well, and also allowing the departments to do their good work and carrying out the goals and policies that you have put out in front of us. So.
Michael, would it be helpful to you, maybe in the form of a study session, that you bring to council all of the policy initiatives you've heard, and then ask us to rank them?
I would welcome that opportunity. Yes, thank you.
So the first meeting in March, let's get it on the agenda.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing.
That is this.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll be, if I can't, I'll get it on there as soon as possible. I have a vested interest in getting that direction from you. So yes, sooner rather than later.
Okay, but so I guess we would need a listing so that there's some understanding of the full scope, what's on the menu or what's, on your list, so then council could weigh in. At this point, you could maybe infer based on some of the expressions of value here and the themes within the conversation. So,
and if the council would like to discuss that as early as this afternoon, there are certain things that I could bring up that have come in your recent council meetings that we could discuss now, or if the council would want to see that in a separate study session, I can do that as well.
I like the idea of a comprehensive study session.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm worried about timing right now since it's 2:25. And we also committed, I believe, to a separate session dealing with the CIP in a similar fashion. So those are drill downs that it seems like you need to go beyond the session today. Does that make sense? Those would be two immediate follow-ups, but also as part of this budget planning cycle so that it comes in time to make an impact on the budgetary allocations.
Yes, and Daniel, if we could just acknowledge the fact that the final but not least support services area is finance. It's why one of the major reasons that we're here today. We're going to be hearing a lot more from Michelle, who has really stepped up as we conduct our search for finance director, and she has developed a schedule going forward for budget adoption, of which this might be considered the first step. Is there anything else, Michelle, that we should add at this time?
Yeah, I did want to circle back on a couple of points that were brought up today by council members. More interesting facts, I would say. So one thing I wanted to remind council members, Scott, you brought up the business license tax. The city did conduct a full study of the business license tax rates and the cap in 2011, and we did amend our ordinance. Accordingly, we increased the rate from 0.08% to 0.1%, and the cap almost tripled to $300,000 at that time. Currently, the cap is at about $333,000 annually. It's worth noting there's only currently one business in Emeryville that pays that maximum cap. So you had mentioned there's a two-tier system for business license taxes, but really there's one large business in the city that pays at that cap. So I did want to mention that is something we've been looking at. We continue to do business license tax discovery as well. As you noted, it's in our top 5 general revenue sources, so it's a really key revenue source for us and one that we look at very closely and monitor closely. And then also I wanted to mention, to Nora's point, I did actually compare the city of Emeryville's FTE to a couple of neighboring small cities. And what I found interesting, if we look at Albany, for example, they have an FTE of approximately 70 employees less than ours, so they're at about 86. However, their total assessed property value, which was one measure I looked at, was about half. They have about 2.1. Total jobs in the city, I looked at total jobs versus daytime population, less than half of what Emeryville has. And then also I think a key indicator is the general fund budget dollars. So the general fund that they're supporting is 16 million versus our 32 million. So again, roughly half. And I think that just speaks to the level of services that we're providing in our city. And then also just wanted to remind staff the new real property transfer tax that the city adopted was effective January 1st. And we now have a complete year worth of revenue to report. We just received the December receipt. And if we compare year over year, we're roughly almost $3 million increase in that revenue source. So that's really great news for us. Right, yeah. So that's a key factor as we look at our general fund revenues and what we can support in the next 2 years. Yeah, so those are the main things I wanted to mention.
Thank you
Okay, very good. Thank you. Very helpful. Any comments or questions from council to follow up on that from Michelle? Okay, so I just made a note that we will have the follow-up sessions dealing with the CIP priorities within that and the policy initiatives to be conducted by Michael and others. Did that, Maurice?
Quick question for Carolyn. Did you want to talk about city clerk's offices, support services? Because I know you're making a lot of changes there.
It is, we're going through tremendous changes and turnover, but suffice it to know that we will be scheduling an item to bring to council pertaining to one of the major initiatives, which is records management. We'll be bringing that to council as far as a major upcoming project. But very appreciative of having, and with Ian's assistance, brought in an interim city clerk, and so we're off and running. Thank you.
Is that going to be paid for under major maintenance or CIP?
Neither, probably neither of the
Microphone.
Oh.
No, for
my
Nora.
For Nora.
Nora's
microphone.
No.
Oh, yeah.
It would not, I don't think it would qualify as a CIP, and it would be over a period of probably a year or so that we would engage some expertise, consultants, and part-time help in a hands-on overall complete overhaul of our records.
Okay. All right. So we should turn our attention to the last item here for the session, and I would just note that the summary and next steps is a bit of a buffer there of time because we won't need 15 minutes in total for the summary, so we'll be okay time-wise. And just because this is a goal-setting session, we talked about priorities. It is one session in a number of sessions along the way of creating the new 2016-2018 budget. So I think we wanted to assure everyone here, council, staff, and community that there's going to be a number of public sessions with the council leading up to a budget adoption. That this is not by any means the final word on these subjects. It's ongoing dialogue and conversation, and obviously you'll need some more information brought forward. There were a number of places where council asked for some clarifications and so forth. So that being said, we still would like to get some provisional direction and sense of priorities here. So here's what I would suggest. There's two kinds of prioritization that might be useful at this juncture. And again, it is very provisional, just based on what we have heard today and what you've said about these different areas. So I just made note of the fact there's 8 items within this, 2, 4, 3, 5, and 4. And so we can get some sense of the council priorities within a category, but also over all of the 6 categories. I think that would be useful to staff at this point. And so it's a very simple thing. I would just ask each of the council members to say, like, for within this category, okay, so if you had to pick 3 priorities, what would they be? So I'd like you to write those down. So you would pick 3 within this category. So for example, lighting, addressing homeless, impact on public space, the climate action plan, the CIP, completing those items, addressing sea level rise, continuing with the Bay Ped Bike Trail, Bay Edge, creation of a microgrid from an energy generation standpoint, and bike ped friendly infrastructure that accommodates all ages and abilities. So there's 8 items there. You can pick 3, and that's part of this process that helps to try to get down to what are some of the council priorities overall. So then you get 3 in that category. So if you want to make notes to yourself on that, what would be your top 3? We can get through this pretty quickly, and I'll make some marks here to correspond to your top 3 choices. Okay, so you kind of go with the Malcolm Gladwell approach. He says, blink within the first few seconds. That's probably your most accurate sense of where you are as a person choosing things. Don't dwell on it too much, and again, because this is a provisional kind of exercise, we could see with quick read where the council is on these different items. So with that being said, how many chose lighting as one of their top 3 items? Okay. How about the homeless impact issue? 1, 2. Climate action plan? 1, 2.
Oh, I chose that too. I'm
Okay.
looking all the way across and noticing the overlap between categories, and so even though I may not have designated it,
It's okay.
this.
That's okay. We'll pull, that's why I was doing the vertical and the horizontal.
Okay.
Okay, CIP, how many chose that as one of their top 3? 1, 2. Sea level? 1, 2. Continuous ped bike trail on the Bay Edge? Creation of the microgrid, bike ped friendly infrastructure. 1, 2. Okay, so in this category, community development, there's only 2 things. So you only choose 1 in that case. What would be your top?
There are more.
There are?
Yes. Who isn't the housing?
Well,
the unhoused and.
Well, that's 1.
Expectations.
And these are all tactics within that broader objective. Okay. So affordable housing in a general sense, and these are tactics. Protect what we have, add more, increase density with high livability associated with it. That's all part of that broader objective.
I'm looking down below and seeing
here
for the unhoused, and then worker protections, who's being left behind is.
Okay, well,
are those all, that's part of the subset?
Well, okay, it could be, but let's break it out then. This, who's left behind, would be the unhoused. So let's say then you still have 1 in that category. So which would be your top?
Daniel, on
1?
the housing for the unhoused, I'm going to favor that, but I want to have in there someplace a regional approach on that.
We said strategically that, let's see, I thought we said, here and or with neighboring cities.
Right.
That was part of Jack's comment, I think, that whether we do it ourselves, but maybe it's a coalition of cities, not unlike we've done in terms of public safety. So there's 3 things, pick 1, and we'll see where we stand. Again, council, how many chose this affordable housing as a top item?
Kind of.
Okay, 3. Well, we're just trying to create some distinction here. Housing the unhoused. So you have to make some choices. So 2, and then the worker protections. Okay. So in this category, again, you have to pick one. So the items were adopt policies to support worker-owned businesses, provide support for small business attraction and retention and development, address the issues associated with the sharing economy because there's pressure on taxi cabs and affordable housing with the Uber and Lyft and Airbnb and those type of systems running out there. And then also establishing a community benefits agreement framework that would help us to address needed community priorities. So there's 4 items there. If you had to choose your top priority, how many would choose this one, supporting worker-owned business?
Well, I'd like to see that as if it's a friendly amendment to
Put
have
it
that
with
be
this?
under supporting small business.
Okay. Worker-owned business and small business, how many would support that? That smart packaging. Okay, 4. Addressing the sharing economy.
Well, I want to weigh in on that.
And then establishing community benefits.
Yeah, but for me, I put worker-owned business under that one. So that's
Okay, well, that's good because then that's 5 for that. No, I think that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's true. A lot of these are not cleanly delineated, and that's by virtue of our discussion, but it gives us a direction, right? It's the worst form, but it's the best compared to everything else, as Winston Churchill said once. So under community services, developing and expanding funding sources. Now, one suggestion was a business license tax. I took it to mean that's an example, but maybe the concept is we need to look for revenue expansion within to support the community services, making a stronger commitment to the Emeryville Child Development Center because of the issues impacting women in the workforce and families more generally, and retaining the sliding scale across all the services provided by Emeryville. And all of these things are going to cost money, but you would choose one of those. Which would be your top priority? How many choose to expand the fund, putting effort into expanding funding?
The last category would take care of the first category.
Yeah.
Yeah. That if
include the first category right in the last one.
This one?
Yes, it would be by necessity.
Okay, so if you did that, how many would choose that, which is a combination of the two?
And isn't there also a relationship
Fine.
There is to the Child Development Center
as
too.
well,
Yeah.
with the sliding scale.
Okay, so you got to do them all. So that's that's fine. That happens. Public safety, you have 2. So establishing neighborhood councils, expanding neighborhood watch. We agreed those were separate items. Expanding the resources available to the public safety units, police, fire, police, I guess, mainly, and the comment was made, we should look at what we have, what the gap is in terms of what we really need, and try to close that gap. And then bike patrol officers, that's really part of that. And then addressing emergency preparedness. So which 2 things would you pick? How many chose neighborhood councils? 2.
That's not really under public safety, though. Not that it matters that much, but
Okay. Could be under there, or
Community development, it could be under.
It could be. Okay. But we like it, nevertheless, 2 there. It's neighborhood watch.
And emergency preparedness is under services right now.
Right. So it came up in this category. So neighborhood watch, how many made that one of theirs? Okay. Getting more resources so we can fund bike patrol officers and in general.
And special programs
for
crime prevention.
Right. And emergency preparedness, we'll deal with that as part of the other category, but it's still. Support services, we had 4 things, so you can choose one thing. So investing in professional development for staff, and we talked about the career path, trying to grow within. And this one was about trying to emphasize full strategies, options to reduce churning and to maybe push more full-time staff positions. This one was to beef up code enforcement staff based on the issues you're seeing out there. And then implementing the Cultural Arts Center on the vacant property adjacent here. So which of those 4 would be your top priority? Professional development? Who would choose that?
Yeah,
One.
if we could make a couple comments. That expanding cultural arts, that's implement arts center does not go under support. That's community development.
That's it.
Okay.
That's capital improvement program.
Capital improvement. CIP.
Yes,
Okay.
that's in the CIP.
Okay, so you still get 1. So investing in, because there's only 3. So
First 2.
investing in professional development. How many would choose that as their top priority?
I was hearing, we're going to do that anyway.
It's a priority.
Right? It's a priority.
Okay. Options, so this staff, this growing staff, full-time staff? Yes?
Yeah.
1, 2. How about beefing up code enforcement? 2. 3. Okay, that's some direction. So now you get 9 choices for the whole board. So you can pick all the way across 9 top priorities. So it's a little harder. It's just another way of thinking about it. And so
I'm going to need a couple of things because the process of this is not, I like to deliberate, so I don't like what's happening right now. This
spend more time
completely goes against the grain of my personality. So what will be very important for me is to have a record of all of this.
You'll get
in
it.
a list,
Yeah.
the rankings, so that I'm able to work from it, because to me, to just say, well, that has some overlap, that I can't let that go.
Okay.
I have to think that through more.
Sure.
And so picking 9 things right now, maybe I can, but probably I'm just going to resist
Okay,
this last little
we can
part.
leave it at this. So the list has to be cleaned up, and we might reclassify some of the items, which is fine. And then you may want to also,
You, Jack. 9 is too far. Move
okay,
along.
and you may want to take into account these follow-up sessions that will also influence it.
And it's very difficult for me to make these decisions untethered from a dollar amount. I cannot, I need to see the money in front of me in order to be able to assign things. I'm very grateful that we did this, but getting down further and making choices beyond this is really hard for me.
Okay. So obtaining dollar estimates as, another cycle through the list of items. So let me ask this, from what we know today, are there any missing items? Did we leave anything off the board that really should be in the mix? So that does get factored in and estimated as a part of the staff analysis.
To speak up.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Okay, here we go.
I was a little surprised today. Oh, it's Jennifer. I manage Bay Street. I was a little surprised to see not more discussion about the minimum wage ordinance. We had a lot of discussion about small businesses. But additionally, some of the impacts of the economic development of new business coming to the city of Emeryville, both small and large, how that impacts the minimum wage ordinance impacting that, the business taxes impacting that, impact fees impacting that, and those types of things. I feel that in other cities there's a larger, stronger economic development department, whereas if, for example, if we had somebody come to Bay Street who wanted to come to Bay Street, throw out a name, like a cheesecake factory or something, do we have the support there right now to be able to pull the economic development research that would be available? So that's my comment.
Okay, very good. Any other comments from anybody? Yes.
Ruth Major, resident since 1984 and a member of Residents United. Oh, sorry. I just want to respond. There's a new piece of research out about the $15 minimum wage, and it's showing that cities that have adopted this change and have increased wages for people are seeing more jobs, more money coming back into the economy, and things are looking much better than ever anticipated by those who were for and those against. And that's a new piece of research out. I think it actually came out this week. It's worth looking at.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Just briefly, when you were talking about the environment, I don't know who to address this to, but the land on which the boardwalk at Watergate sits is eroding. Some of the stones have fallen down. There's drainage that's eating away at the dirt. I think this is probably some other agency, but I sort of thought that the city of Emeryville would be in touch with them, so.
HOA responsibility.
Oh, they said it wasn't, so, okay, thank you.
Okay. Again, is there other things we might have left off that need to be in consideration? Back row here, Gail. Okay, we're going to finish right on time, I think, so hang in there.
Good. Gail Donaldson on the Planning Commission, and I just want to make sure that one thing that does not fall through the cracks is our need for parks. We're talking about becoming more dense, attracting more families. That is a resource that is really, really vital to families with children. We have a standard in our general plan of 3 acres of park per 1,000 residents and a 1/4 acre per 1,000 employees, and we're below that, and we're building in more things, bringing in more people, and we are not keeping up with the standard that we set for ourselves. So I think we need to really make sure that that gets looked at carefully so that that doesn't go away. If we lose the land, if it gets built on, there's not going to be a future park.
Okay, right there next to you.
Hi, a couple of things. So back to the engagement piece with the community, I just wanted to say, I wonder if there's an opportunity for the council to think about making a statement about what do we want this community to be, a community image. It could help with a lot of the residents that are transitional or new here to really buy into Emeryville. Talking about infrastructure issues, I think there's a great opportunity to talk about how to better utilize existing infrastructure. As part of our HOA, we have far and away number one, number two complaint is congestion with traffic. I think that can be solved with a lot of technology out there, and also property crimes as well. So. Something to kind of put out there. And finally, on disaster preparedness, we're actually in our HOA, we're actually going through that whole process right now. We want to be be prepared, but we don't even know how to engage with the city on that. And how do we get those plans developed and known? And so that's an opportunity there to work with. Maybe this is through a neighborhood council when it is developed, or some other function as well. So there's just things to keep in mind. Thank you.
Any other comments? Anything else we might have left off the list? Okay, so we're going to wrap up then and just provide some quick points again about next steps. We will make a complete narrative summary of all the notes, and you'll get a hard copy and a graphic rendition as well in miniature form. We'll organize it and we'll make sure we clean up some of the language so the items are grouped correctly and the content analysis is there, so you'll have that as a resource and a reference point. The follow-up sessions dealing with CIP, policy initiatives, records management, some of the other internal investments that the city manager and executive staff have determined to be important. I think you said council need to have that information, and you also want to make sure you have some of the cost estimates associated with that so you can make better decisions about how to allocate scarce or limited resources. But I think you'll have some good reference points in the process of doing that. And we'll do some more work on the performance measures that were identified here too, so you have that to refer to as you go through this next series of steps. So I think that's about what we needed to do. Carolyn, did you have any additional points? And Mayor
from
also?
Here, this is great information, and it gives us the foundation of exactly what staff could use to, and we'll be getting together very quickly while it's fresh in our minds, and summarize it and attempt to put together some options for this council to discuss at a future council meeting very soon. Again, as a basis for budgetary considerations. So
Good.
thank you, extremely helpful.
And as we said at the outset, we wanted to start the prioritization process. Obviously, there's more work to be done. It's not final here. Talk about the future, get all the ideas on the table, hear from our colleagues and the community, and ultimately to focus on implementation. We're not there yet, but we'll need to do a lot more detailed work. So back to you, Mayor.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Isofano. I want to thank everyone who came today, and especially my colleagues on council. At this time, I want to make sure that if anyone on council would like the opportunity to weigh in before the close of the meeting, you have that opportunity now. Does anyone have any closing comments?
I have a comment. I just want to thank everybody that came and stayed the course today. This is really, it's really important work. We have a lot of things on the table. It's really wonderful to have the input to kind of put them in the proper order. Thank you for coming.
Jack, did you want to?
I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. My dear wish would be that if we had a community identity, it would be a bunch of people who were geeky about city politics, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen. You got some. And myself. I include myself in that. But thank you to everyone who showed up today, and thank you to staff. I know this requires a lot of work and time to give us the framework to ask these questions. And I hope that people will, if we could get a kind of summary schedule for the folks who are interested today, when we're going to revisit this at each stage, I think that'd be really useful in order to just make sure that people know when these items are going to hit the agenda. Mm-hmm. But thank you to everyone and to my colleagues always too. Yeah.
Great. And thanks to our facilitator.
Yes, thank you very much, Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel.
April has a...
Just a quick question. This nice package that the city council is going to get, will we also have access to it?
It's anything that goes to the council is posted as public information. It gets posted on the day that we'll try and put some kind of a special, like a crawl or a
that'd be nice.
Headline news or something, so that you really notice it.
You'll link in the newsletter as well that goes out?
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
So just to emphasize, this is the beginning of the process, not the end. Thank you, everyone, for giving up your Saturday, and this meeting is adjourned at 2:54.
Good night.